Did you come out this year? Or did you have to wait 1 more year? I think he's a redshirt freshman last. Was he redshirt? No, he's a true freshman last year. Actually, it's 3 years. Yeah.
All right. A couple things that I wanted to go over before we get into the heart of the discussion. The majority of today is going to talk about, it's going to kind of be focused and geared towards SDGE and Underground and kind of their workflow and some tools that I've developed to help that. However, some of that stuff is going to be applicable to everybody. Some of the applications apply to everything that we do here. It can also help spark innovation. There's a lot of things that we can develop to maximize your workflows regardless of what group you're in. So hopefully some of the things that I mentioned today that's directed specifically to SDGE and Underground will be applicable and maybe spark some ideas that you have. So there's a couple things I want to discuss. The first being just dealing with civil 3D objects. So a lot of times in our prospector, we'll notice this little orange triangle next to something. That means it's in use. It's in use by something else residing in your drawing. Since this is an alignment, I know that it's being used by profiles, and there's surface profiles that are being created using this alignment. So when it's like that, you'll notice that there's no delete command in here. So sometimes you wonder, well, how am I supposed to delete this object if there's no delete function? Yeah. So there is a shortcut. It involves selecting the select command. So you can always hit select on that object, move your mouse to model space, and just hit delete. And then it will kill it. Just be careful when you do that, because one of the reasons why they don't want that delete command here is because other things rely on it. So by deleting, this alignment, I'm also deleting everything that references it or is attached to it. For instance, this is my proposed storm drain that I have in this drawing. So if I delete it, you always have to move your mouse to model space. You'll notice that my profile went away. There was a pipe network that was associated with it. So all those objects are removed. So be very careful when you're using this. I'm showing it because there are situations that you're going to run into where you're going to want to or need to delete it. Just be aware of what you're doing on all these workarounds. Next thing is you may have noticed this little icon here, or not that icon, a pop-up that pops up here talks about standards configuration and running something. That's something new that I've incorporated into the template. And basically what that is it's the Manage tab, and then the CAD Standards. So right now we'll go to this Configure command. So right now what it's doing is it's referencing our template, all styles template, and we can check our standards based off of that template. So this is something that's built into AutoCAD. To me, it's a little more powerful than using the CMI Standards Manager, because this is comparing it to things that we've developed here locally, whereas the CMI is kind of this company-wide database. And everything that I've developed here in the last 7 months is not incorporated into the CMI SQL databases. So let's say you wanted to, let's say your dimension styles in this drawing are off by one way or another. You can't kind of figure out why they're not displaying correctly. You could run this. Actually didn't want to do that. You could run your drawing against our template, and then it would prompt you if you wanted to fix that style. It would detect that there's settings that are different than what the template is showing, and then you could manually say, yes, apply those to this drawing. So it could fix a lot of things that may be wrong in your drawing without actually being able to diagnose what they are. So you may notice that this standard violation pops up. The next update that I give you guys in this next couple days or week will kind of eliminate that pop-up. What it is it's just a setting here under config. I'll show you where it is. Under settings. The next update will set this to disable standards notifications so that you don't have to constantly click that, or that if you want to get a head start, that's where you go to disable it. And that way it will only run when you tell it to run or to even notify you. Because a lot of times you're not really going to care about any violations that occur, and you'll want to just run it manually. Next thing is just a little helpful command that some of you may not be necessarily aware of. There may be situations where you have text that you want to align to, let's say, your alignment or your storm drain pipe network or anything really. There's a really helpful command called TORIENT, or TORI for short. Well, all you have to do is select the text, and then you can select 2 points on the object, and it will take up that bearing. It's a pretty quick way of doing things and aligning things within your drawing. I know a lot of times we'll try to keep our text orthogonal, but there are situations where we'll want to orientate it to our objects, and that's a quick and easy way to get that rather than eyeballing something and then having it be off a little bit. It's just a quick way to do that. So it's TORIENT, or TORI, as in Tory Hunter for short, not Tory spelling. Next command that's kind of helpful is some old functionality in the Express tools. You may remember it. It's called MAPCLEAN. This is a really neat tool that can kind of help resolve some issues in your drawing. Basically, it has a lot of things that you can clean up is the objective of this tool, hence map cleanup. So some of the things that it can do. So we'll include all objects. We won't specify any layers or automatic selection. We'll do everything within this drawing. And it has a bunch of cleanup actions that you can assign to your selected drawing. So let's say we want to delete any duplicate line work. So we'll add that to the drawing. We'll also, zero length objects, we'll get rid of those. Purge will also do that if you have that check marked, just so you know. A lot of times that will happen. Or, dissolve pseudonodes. There's all kinds of things that you can run here. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. Delete duplicates and zero length objects are the most widely used, and they're usually found within your drawing. This should be a pretty clean drawing, so I don't expect it to detect anything. So 0 errors were detected. Just so you know, that's also under your Home tab, under Modify. Little broomstick is to delete duplicate objects, so that's kind of the most commonly used, so they have included that in this as well. It's also the command for just delete duplicate objects is OVERKILL, so if you always forget, there's 3 ways to find a command. So that's just to maintain clean files. Next thing I want to talk about is layer filters. So there's a cool layer filter now in the template. It's called _selection_set-group. And what this guy does is it lets you manually select layers that you want to add to a filter. And you just right click on it, select layers, add. And hopefully this guy will go away. And then you can select, let's say I want those 2 layers in my filter. So there they are. So that's really helpful if you want to, just limit your changes to a couple layers. You can select the layers and then make changes rather than hunt through, let's say 3,000 layers in this drawing, or 1,000 layers, just not in the XREFs. So the use of that selection set layer filter can be quite useful. And of course, you can always add more, or you can delete these guys out. Actually, I don't think I can do that way because they're in use. You'll have to replace them. You can't actually try to delete them like I'm doing. This computer's not happy with me. So just know that that is now built into your template. It's actually pretty easy to add if you're in a current drawing and not using the template. It's the second icon here. So it's a new group filter is all that it's called. That's all it is, just that one button there. So you can add it to a current drawing if you're working in a drawing that's not started from the template. So it's just that second icon there is a group filter. This first filter is a filter property, and that's what's existing here. It's using these have properties that you can use and set to do the filtering. So it's a group filter to actually select the layers. So last month we talked about a couple really cool commands. DDB, which helped orientate our viewports in model space, and also ISC, which inserts the, let me just create the scale based off of whatever we wanted it to do. Well, just to make things fun and exciting, so we'll do something like that. So we all know that the layout tools here, the north arrow and the scale bar, were causing us some corruption in our drawing viewports. They're basically setting them to 0 and zooming out, wiping out quite a bit of work. So now what you'll notice is that there's nothing there. So you have to use either ISC to insert your scale bar. That's what I would recommend. So what do you do for north arrow? There's this awesome list routine that I've developed, INA. I don't know if you've used it yet. INA, you select the viewport that you want it to associate with. So we'll select that one. It'll pop up this window, which is already set to where our north arrows are. And then you'll select the north arrow that you want, say engineering, and then insert where you want it. And you'll notice that the north arrow uses the orientation of your viewport. Pretty cool. Just know that this is not dynamic. Neither of these are dynamic. So if you do change your viewport, your north arrow and your scale are not going to change. However, that means that it also won't corrupt your viewport. So that's a fair trade-off in my eyes. So that's INA. That
do you have north arrow options, or is that the rule?
You have all your options. And you can assign multiple north arrows to the same viewport, just so you know, because it's not dynamically linked. So all these files contain all the different north arrows that this company uses. So let's say transmission. So you have all of them there. So that's why I had it bring up that window browser, so you can select which one you want to use based on what group you're working for. So both of those commands are auto-loaded within AutoCAD. It's part of the Office list routine that gets loaded. It calls those list routines. So just be aware of that. So the next thing you'll notice is that you've got a new toolbar here. So this is along the same lines of our CUI. Let me exit out of that command. Show you kind of the back way into it here. So it's all under this SD user toolbars CUI. And the only thing under the CUI is the toolbars itself. So we have the create lines, the line offset, and the standards. If you remember the standards that are dynamic links to the Internet Explorer, to Caltrans, city and county, SDGE. Well, now there's one called layout, and that's what this new one is. So this new toolbar has the DDB, the north arrow, and your scale. So, if you don't like commands or having to remember your commands, you can just have this, lay over here and do the same thing. So just another toolbar for you guys to use if you so desire, or it's not necessary by any means. You can just type the commands. They're They're preloaded. All right. I'm going to close that. All right. So some of the things that has happened this last month. Go to Settings. I'm in the SDGE template. Some of the things that I want to look at are the profile view labels. In particular, the station elevation. What you'll notice is this list has been cleaned up and reorganized. We now have specific styles that are all kind of grouped together for these pipe crossing labels. And if we go into one, there's just been a lot of cleanup that has happened. So the point of everything is to make it user-friendly, to have somebody outside of this office be able to come in and utilize and know what's going on with all the styles. So previously, this was a mess. You know, it was just kind of line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, and then there were 5 different text labels here. So all this has been cleaned up. All these lines are identified as what lines they are within the label. So you can clearly tell which is which if you want to change something. All this text now resides in one label, and all that text is tied to this point here as opposed to the point here. So it makes manipulation of this a lot easier. You can make any changes that you need to on the fly without really understanding how it was composed. So everything's just kind of been cleaned up. The way that these are grouped together is because it's going to benefit your workflow, mostly for SDGE now. This is what we're talking about, SDGE Underground. It's going to better suit their workflow. And this may come into play in a lot of different groups around here. Anytime you're dealing with a pipe crossing and profile, you'd want to use this label style. So we're going to just take a walk down kind of some of their workflow and incorporate some of these tools that has already been developed and has been maximized. So last month, I think it was last month, we talked about kind of some of the dynamic blocks that have been developed for our storm drain. So here they are. You know, those look very familiar, right? Even if you haven't used them, they look familiar. So we got the plan view, the one vertical exaggeration, the 4 exaggeration, and the 5 exaggeration. So we have that for our curved inlets. And then we have our D7, D8, etc. These don't really require special blocks for profiles because really all they are is a block or a box. So we don't really need to show extra detail. Versus a catch basin, something like this curved inlet, we're going to want some extra detail. We're going to want to know what the floor does. That could significantly impact our elevations of our pipes or required pipes. You know, whether or not the pipe's in the front or coming out of the rear of the catch basin. We need that kind of detail if we're doing some storm drain plans. First, with some of these D7, 8, and 9, and 10, they're really just a rectangular box, and we don't really need as much detail, so we're fine using the predefined block or part builder, really. So similarly, I've developed the same type of blocks for the SDGE Underground group. So we've got our plan view blocks here. Something that I feel is very important is to have a label within your block so you know what it is. So you can clearly always see what it is. So it's a 3315 handhole. That's important in our workflow because we're going to want to put a network part over this. And if I have this block in my base file without a name, I don't really know what block then I'm trying to place over it. You know, I need to know that this is a 3315. Having a block there doesn't help me unless I know what it is. So identifying your blocks is very important. I would suggest you have simple text within your block that identifies what it is. And that's pretty much been defined for you in all the blocks that I develop. All that text is on non-plottable layers. This one itself is a construction block information layer. the dimensions are on construction dimension layer. So you can freeze those independently of one another. So a lot of times you're not going to want the dimensions. However, what I would encourage you to do is check the dimensions at least first. Make sure that it is what you want to be using, and it will also help verify and validate the parts that are being developed. You know, always check something once. You know, make sure that this knockouts are the correct dimension that you're anticipating. You know, this is 2 feet off, so you can start your curve there. So little things like that can really speed up your process and make sure that you have exactly what you want to have. So there are those guys in plan view. So if we just use a pipe network for those, this is the level of detail that we're going to get. So those first 4 handholds, they're just simple box structures, nothing very special. However, if you're designing underground electrical, where does your conduit come in? Don't really know using the part, because the part, pipe networks is pretty limited at this stage in terms of, hey, we can show the outer boundary of the part, but we can't really add any detail. So that's why we have all these profile blocks associated with them. Here you have your knockouts, so you know where your conduit comes in. So what you're going to want to do is set your parts using part networks or pipe networks. Then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to copy these blocks, and you would have your OSNAP set correctly, like me. And you'd place them over the block over the part. And then you would adjust this if you needed something higher or deeper, I should say. So you would adjust it there. And that dimension changes. This is based off of 1 foot increments. So this is an incremental block, dynamic block, but you can kind of see those white dash marks there. Those are the foot increments that I can adjust to. So they act the same way as the storm drain, curb inlets, and catch basins and junction structures. Because having this information is critical to your design, just like it is with the bottom of your catch basin or curb inlet. You need to know where this stuff is. And the pipe network does not allow for that. So that's why we're going to want to kind of overlay these blocks onto our pipe network to give us the detail that we want. So let's kind of see, you know, we've got all of our different ones here. We got the larger ones. We got the ones with the double manhole, etc. So what does this look like in a production setting? Alright, so over here we have just the basics of a plan that we're working on in this office. Oops. Uh-oh, you recognize it. But before I do that, there's something else I wanted to show you. There's also another LISP routine that has been written into your AutoCAD startup menu. Let's say you wanted to change the color of this layer in this XREF. Let's say you didn't know what layer that was on. So you'd go XList, you'd misspell it too. Then you'd click on it, you'd find it, alright? Then you'd go in here, you'd spend half an hour. Alright, that's an exaggeration. Alright, then you'd go to it and be able to change it. There's an easier way. By simply typing CC. This is a change color command. That's what I named it, CC. You can just click on the entity and change the color. Obviously I didn't pick a good color. Green. So that can save you a lot of time when you're dealing with a lot of XREFs that you may not be familiar with as well. You know, not every XREF that we reference in is going to be created by NV5. So you may not know that. That's going to be a EXTO, CN, MA, obscure. So that's just CC. The one hindrance to that is if you want to undo it, it's a little bit of a hassle. You've got to undo it until you see your CC command. This one is going to be quite a few. I think I've gone back far enough. But you'll notice that it's still changed, even though I've actually undone the command. Similarly with points, what we see in points, that the changes don't take effect until your drawing is regenerated. So if I regen, then it's going to change back. So it kind of behaves like points. It requires a regen to display correctly. So that's CC, change color. So now that I've shown you that, I'll unload my XREF for the topo.
Jarrod, the update command where you can pull down, kind of ties into
Mm-hmm.
shortcut. It's kind of nice when you're trying to back up steps too.
Yeah, you can.
Skip over.
This will undo a bunch of commands rather than hitting undo and spacebar 20 times like I did. Especially if you're using commands that are easily identifiable, like that CC command. I could scroll down to where I see the CC. Yeah, so
Layer state.
Yeah, the previous layer thing.
what was that? Previous layer?
Previous layer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should. It will still. I think it still requires a regen though.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so getting back to our underground workflow a little bit and dealing with pipe networks. So I think we're pretty comfortable. Everybody here is pretty comfortable using the NV5 tools. Man, this is an ugly layout. Yeah, it's, when I attach this projector, it's screwed with my screen size, so everything's a little off. So I hope, and I think we're all comfortable creating pipes from points. Is that a correct statement? Everybody know how to do that?
Not I. No.
Not I. All right. So we'll do that real quick. So typically we'll get points in from the field for pothole data. Since I don't really have that information with me right now, we're just going to create 2 points. We'll call it top of storm drain, right? Is our description. We'll say this is 2. We'll say this is 10. And then we'll create something here. Top of storm drain. We'll give it an elevation of 5. All right, so let's say that information is from our pothole data. So this NV5 tools under civil, this will look differently on your screen, but under pipes, you'll see pipes from points. So we'll click that. It'll take a second to load. All right, so here we select our storm drain that we're interested in. Existing storm drain. Doesn't work well in this drawing actually. Trying to think. Yeah, let me create one. This isn't the best example because I already have data shortcutted pipe networks in here. So my existing storm drain is a data shortcut, so I can't really add anything to it. But we'll just create a new pipe network. We'll call it existing storm drain live. And we'll tell it we want to use the storm drain part list. We would tell it that we wanted to use the surface alignment. No. So we'll do that. So now we have a good network that we can add to. So we'll go back here. Normally you'll be adding these pipes in your existing utility, and then your pipe network would already be created, and that would be the active one that you would be using. This is a little different because I'm using it as a data shortcut. But for workflow, we'll go through this. All right, so existing storm drain live. So let's say we know our surveyors were so kind and they told us it was RCP, and they also told us it was a 24-inch RCP. Then we want to hit this 2-point tab. So what's our starting point? We'll go ahead and select this guy. And then our end point, we'll select this point. And what is this? So this elevation is the top of pipe, and this elevation was the top of pipe, because after all, this was a pothole. However, that could be different. Let's say this downstream end, it was actually an invert of the pipe because it was a head wall. So just to make it interesting, we'll say that that was actually the invert of the pipe. And you'll scroll down. That's the critical thing, is to scroll down and not hit close. You'll actually want to hit this, create pipe. So we'll go ahead and create the pipe. Then we'll hit close. Now, why didn't the pipe show up? Well, that has to deal with our pipe network and how our pipe network was set up. Existing storm drain live. Right now, the style is blank, just because when we created this pipe network, that's how it was being told to do. It didn't have a style associated with it. So we'd ultimately want to change that, but for this, we're just going to put it on crossing the existing storm drain. Now there's two styles. This is something else that has been added to the template: an assumed depth and a pothole depth. This was pothole data, right? So we'll select the pothole. And all that's going to do is it's going to have a different display property in the profile when we get to it. So here's our pipe, created using those pothole data. And just to verify things, we'll go to Pipe Property, and under Part Property tab, we'll go down and take a look at this pipe. Man, I was really good when I picked my points. 2% slope. You wish you could do that. I wish I could do that too. So you'll notice that our start invert elevation is 5, so it picked up that point and adjusted it correctly. If we look at the end elevation, we notice that it's 7.75. Well, that's not the 10 that we told it was. Well, that 10, we said that that was the top of the pipe. So we have to subtract the wall thickness, 24-inch pipe, and so that's how it's coming up with the 7.75. So it's doing all that based off of the pipe that we told it was, and the fact that the shot was the top of the pipe. It calculates the invert of our pipe. So the next thing we would want to do is we'd want to add that to our profile of our main trench. So we're at about 1850, let's say, is where that pipe crossing takes place. So here we've got a profile all set up. We've got a bunch of stuff added to it, but just for fun, we'll just show that one pipe there. So 1850, somewhere in here, somewhere up here it should be. However, I can tell my inverts are off, so this isn't going to be a great example, but we can go back and adjust them. So the way you get it to show up in your profile is you right-click on your profile, go to Profile View Properties, Pipe Network tab. Since this has already been set up for Pipe Network, that tab shows. If it doesn't, we can go over that as well. So unfortunately, you do have to check, yes, I want to draw this part in this profile. So once we click yes.
Can't you just right-click on the part and plan and go draw and profile?
You can. You can, except if there's a lot of parts that you want to add, it sometimes isn't the most efficient way of doing things. Like everything is, yeah. Well, I don't think you can select similar with pipe networks. So, like all things in Civil 3D, there's 3 different ways to do it. For me, this way is easier because it lets me kind of verify that it's coming in where I want. If I'm dealing with one pipe, you know, I would do it this way because I would then expect to see that pipe show up at 1850. Reason why I didn't is because our profile grid is we're in the 300s, 500s even, and I said, you know, I just randomly chose 2 points to draw a pipe. You know, I could come back into this pipe. Let's say 480, 490. So I just changed the elevation of those pipes, or of that pipe. 1850 should be right here. So if I scroll up, so that's our storm drain crossing pipe. So that's what it kind of looks like. All right, so we've got all of our crossings in here. Those were all data shortcutted in. So the other thing I wanted to show is kind of how we get these vaults into our drawing. So right now this is our base file.
I had a quick question for the conduits. I know we used to always try to develop this profile where they would go from a stacked conduit rolled into a flat. Can you still do that in pipe networks?
Currently, we're not really profiling those main trenches as pipe networks. That's not to be said that we couldn't. It's just probably extra work that's not necessarily required for our workflow. That's always kind of the thing with Civil 3D is what do we want to spend our time and energy modeling in a 3D environment? And is it cost efficient to do it? Modeling these trenches for a job like this, probably not worth it. However, if then we had this trench and we had a lot of proposed utilities crossing it and we needed to calculate those crossings, there may be instances where we'd want to model that. And maybe we just model a portion of it. We don't necessarily do all 3.5, 5 miles of trench. Maybe we'll just do where we have our concentrated crossings. So I'm going to delete this part. So when you normally come into your profile drawing, it'd be something like this. You would XREF in your base. Your base, since it was developed nicely, has this nice block. You know that it's a 3327. So then when we want to do our profile and draw this structure as a pipe network, it becomes quite easy. So we'll go up to pipes. And what we want to do is we want to edit pipe network since it's already created. Proposed EC. I think I did EC. So this is the network that everything is drawn on. What is it? Oh, it's a 3327. 3327. We just want structure only. So where do we want to place it? We're just going to place it there. That's good enough. Then we're going to just use the align command, and we're just going to pick 2 points. And I set my O snaps aren't on. So just pick 2 points. So there we go. Now we have a part that's for our modeling purposes. I want to save because this may crash. So what does this part look like? Object viewer. So there's our part. So this is a 3D block that we're actually creating. We're modeling these parts now. So in a matter of 2 seconds, we just added a 3D model of what that looks like. So that's great for plan view. What about profile? What do we do for profile? So let me move this. This was my block, my dynamic block. So we'll add that object to our profile. We had it before until I deleted it. So proposed EC, structure 40, because it's not named. So I know that's the new one that we added. So there it is. Like I said, this is also usually not enough detail, doesn't have the knockouts. So that's where we drag this part over. I don't have my midpoint snaps. And now if we need that to be deeper, if we don't have enough clearance for our outgoing trench, we can just use this dynamic grip to change the neck height of this structure. So now we have a 42-inch neck on this structure. So when we go and use our network parts, it's great in terms of locating these structures, but oftentimes doesn't give us enough detail. So that's where we'll use the blocks. All right, so we've added everything to here. Let's talk about labeling. So our structures, to just get some good information going, we'll go up to pipes, add pipe network labels. I always choose the first option here because it lets me select the style that I'm labeling. So I want to enable entire network profile. And what do I want to use? I don't really care about pipes, care about structures. So we'll select the proposed electrical, and then we'll hit add, and we'll select one. So there we go. Now we have all of our structures labeled. All right. What about all of our pipe crossings? We want to label those. This is kind of a two-step process. So the first thing that we want to do is actually do the same thing. Go up to pipes, add pipe network labels, add entire network profile, except now we're interested in our pipes. So what do we want to do? It's this new style called crossing information that will tell you the size, material, and network name. This is an important step, and you'll understand why in a second. So we'll go ahead and add those. So what it does is it's going to label every part of that network. So this is the existing storm drain. So if I look down the line here, it's going to label everything that's part of that existing storm drain. Well, this pipe obviously is not a storm drain, so I need to add that. Or actually, that was the existing live one that we did. So we've got a lot of storm drain. Oh, there's our gas. So there's our gas. And maybe this is a water. Sewer. So you get the idea. So we'll go through and do our 5 networks, you know, gas, sewer, water, storm drain. So now we know what size that is and what material and what it is. It's storm drain. So that lets us add labels to those crossings. So how do we want to do that? We want to go back to our NV5 tools, and under our civil pipes, you'll notice this profile crossing pipe labeler. Hopefully all of you have this. This was incorporated, I don't know how long ago, probably a year ago maybe. But if you haven't run an update, you may not have it. So in the next update that I push out, it will include the NV5 tool update that some of you do not have installed. So this is a very powerful tool. We'll click on it. Brings up this window. So it's asking what style do we want to use. And again, this is where it would be very helpful if this was using the new template and everything was called crossing, storm drain crossing, so that they'd all group together. Since they're not, we have all kinds of random styles in here, very difficult to use. But anyway, we'd want to go to our storm drain and then select 24-inch CMP. And then we'd add linked label, and we'd select the object. Oh, no, we wouldn't. We'd select the profile view, and then select our pipe. Problem is, when we get to our next one, it's a RCP, 24-inch RCP. So I got to come back here and change this to RCP. Pretty cool. Because now you know what all these are, so it's very simple to tell it what to label. So that's the reason why first we go and just give us this information so we can tell it what label to use. And then of course all these labels we're going to want to adjust to the correct, you know, we're going to want to move it up, you know, something like that.
Is this on a non-plottable layer?
Yes, it is. So all those are on a non-plottable layer, or they should be. When you're not using the newest template, it's hard to tell, but yeah, it should be non-plottable. You could also come back and delete them all too. Once you had it all labeled, you're kind of done with them. These labels also are can get a little tricky when you have tightly grouped utility crossings. Because you're like, well, why is it labeling over here versus here? It's because if you actually click on this pipe, you know, this is just representing the crossing of where it physically crosses your alignment. However, this pipe has a beginning and an end, and this label is attaching to the center of that pipe. And the center of that pipe isn't necessarily where it crosses your profiled alignment. So just kind of keep that in mind of, well, why isn't it here? But usually they're pretty easy to figure out which goes with which. You know, in this case it wouldn't matter because they're both 24-inch existing water. That's something else you'll notice is that it doesn't tell you what material is being used. So that was just because this was created using a part list that didn't have the material associated with it. The template should have the material associated with it for all pipe networks, not just the storm drain. Obviously the storm drain pipe network is picking up the material, but the gas and the water is not. So just be aware of that has to be defined in your part. It's not just going to magically pick it up. So if I go to this guy here, pipe properties, start to scroll down towards the bottom, I can see, hey, this is a 36 RCP. That's by the part size name, and then the material that's associated with it is RCP. So we know that the storm drain was done correctly, but if I go to a sewer or water, that material is going to be blank. But hopefully when you start new drawings from the template, those part lists will have the material specified, and so it makes all this labeling that much easier. So in a matter of an hour, you could probably have this whole profile done using these automated labels. So that's kind of the demonstration on the SDGE and underground workflow. Like I said, it's definitely geared towards SDGE and underground, but it's applicable to a lot of us in this room. Anytime we're doing utility crossings, you know, this is a really good way of doing it. The cool thing about this too, let's go back to that 18. Let me make sure I labeled that 18. Yeah, I did. 1850, way up here. This guy here. So let's say this you know, this pipe crossing changed, or more likely your alignment changed in some fashion. Just want to make sure. More likely your alignment is going to change rather than a pipe crossing, but to demonstrate the effect, I'm just moving the pipe. So what you'll notice is, hey, there's the pipe, it moved. So the advantage of using pipe networks versus maybe projections or something like that is all your changes that you make are going to be reflected in a dynamic environment. Well, what about my label? How come my label is not, didn't adjust as well? Well, it will. You just kind of have to tell it. It's not quite as smart because it's not, you know, this is a custom built application. It's not native to Civil 3D. So you kind of have to help it a little bit. So we'll reopen this guy here, and you'll notice link and update labels, bulk update labels. So you'll notice that it changed. The station actually changed 1817 versus we were more like 1850, and the elevation would update as well. And it did tie back down here. The only disadvantage to that is, yeah, you kind of have to go in here and readjust your label. You know, you have to redrag it, make sure your spacing is correct and everything's is like how you like. But they are dynamic. You just have to tell them to update. Not a big deal versus changing all kinds of information on that. Any questions?
Good job.
So the one thing, unfortunately, that I'm going to tell you is that sometimes your labels for structures don't really behave as nicely as these profile view labels. When you're using the NV5 tools and that profile labeler, this is actually a profile view label, which is different than the structure label. This is a pipe network label. You'll notice that the functionality is considerably different. You almost have no control over a pipe network label. What are my options? I can move it, which I wouldn't want to do. And you know, it does not behave. There's not not a way to add grips in the leader line. There's not any of this functionality, you know, move, rotate. So these pipe network labels cause a little bit of hiccup sometimes in our labeling. So just be aware that there may be cases where you don't want to use your pipe network labels. However, you don't really have to fear about that. We'll just add a pipe network or profile view label instead.
You've changed it out with the properties?
I can't. No, you can't switch entities like that in this release. You may later. So we do have labels for vaults or structures or whatever you would like to call them. Again, this is kind of a combined template that, you know, is kind of a work in progress. So all this stuff has been developed here within the last 2 weeks. So it's not necessarily incorporated into something. And this template probably doesn't even have it. But just first, we'll just say that it's a 69 kV vault. Select our profile view. And then we would want to pick that center, of course, mid, and mid. So there you go. It's the same information in terms of your station and elevation. And then you would go in here. Oh, I want to edit that text, right? Edit, once you highlight it, you can edit label text. And then here you could call out, you know, this is vault, you know, give it the number that you want, give it the tie line. This you would probably change in the style. Same with the detail, that would be uniform across your plan set. But the vault number, you know, this one might be 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the next one would be, you know, 1, 2, 3, 5. So you can edit that text to get this label to show what you want. You can also keep that pipe network label on there. You may not want to delete it like I did. You may want to keep that information there so that you know what number it is. If you label your parts correctly, then you have that. Then you can go in here and just change it to match what you did on your pipe network label. So if I have this still in there, I can see that it's, oh, you know, structure 2. So then I can select this guy, go into edit label text, you know, and I could call it to then match my part network label. So these part network labels are useful in terms of getting the information. However, they may not necessarily serve your labeling needs. So just be aware that you may want to come back and add labels for these structures, but that's pretty easy to do. And in a simple, something else you can do too is you can always copy profile view labels, so you don't necessarily have to go through this every time. You could just select that as your base point and find your next structure, click. However, you want to be sure to come back and change the style. Not all of these are 69 kV vaults. So you may want to have this be a style that you know needs to be changed. So in the template, there's actually a style called Change Me, so that you can kind of go back then and remember to change these to the right style. So I find that to be a quicker workflow in terms of copying the label and then going back down the line and changing the style versus trying to use this and navigate this. Sometimes I find the Change Me style to kind of help that and facilitate that workflow a little bit quicker. And that goes with your pipe crossings as well. You could do the same thing. You could do it to that Change Me style and then come back you could come back and then just change it here. Sometimes that's quicker if all these are 1 and then you just, you know, come back and change it. You know, there's 3 ways of doing one thing, so that's one workflow as well. So hopefully you see how that can apply to a lot of different things that we're doing here. You know, if you have other ideas for dynamic blocks, I'd love to hear them. You know, we can do almost anything with the dynamic block. You know, this is just a simple stretch command. Well, that's the pipe network part. This is actually just a simple stretch command within the block. You know, and that's there, or you can adjust it here. You don't have to click. We can tell it be 18. You know, all happens. So keep that in mind as you approach your individual workflow in terms of if you have any ideas on ways to speed things up. You shouldn't really, we need to transition out of drafting and more into design. We no longer draft as a living, we design. So very little should actually be drafted. Most of the things that we should do should be automated in one form or another. So if you have any ideas or any challenges in your workflow, let me know, and maybe we can come up with something that will make you more efficient in what you're doing. So I think that's all. Any questions?
Thanks, Jarrod.
Great job. That's not like that.